Voices from the Mausoleum is brought to you by the You Run Podcast Network and yourunpodcast.com. Be sure to check out the Paranormal Misfits podcast, your favorite besties fearlessly exploring the paranormal, uncovering enigmatic mysteries, unraveling mind-bending conspiracies, and sharing thoughts on horror. Prepare to be spellbound. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to an episode of 5 Influential Horror, a series where we talk 5 influential horror movies with all kinds of horror lovers. And today, I finally, face-to-face, after like a year, I think, get to talk to Joshua Pangborn.
I am so glad that this is finally happening. It feels like it's happened earlier, even though it hasn't, because we've talked so much and we've traded emails and I guess tweet DMs, but I don't know if you can say tweets anymore.
Who knows?
I call it that. So there we go.
Yeah.
But no, I chatted with you so much, and then I realized. I literally, as I came on and onto the backstage area, I'm like, we've actually never, I don't think, been in the same room at the same time. So This is exciting. So I'm glad to be here.
Yes, so exciting for me because I talk so highly about you all the time. I'm always like, I love what you do, what you stand for, how positive and happy you are, and just the way you just exude this just good vibe. And then Steve got to chat with you in a different episode, and I was like, my turn. So very excited.
Spread the wealth. That's what I say. Just share me with the world. That's right. My goal.
Yeah. So we are going to talk about your influential horror, but I'm going to reintroduce you and I wanted to talk a little bit, of course, about your current project, what you have going on right now. If you're not familiar, Joshua Pangborn is an indie horror author, an indie horror filmmaker, works for or is it for? I guess what's the right word for at Sidekick Productions?
Created the company, so it's all of the above.
Everything, all of
it
the
owns me, and I pretend to own it. So
that's it.
That's the way it is. So.
No, I love that. Yeah, and I got introduced to you because I know you're in the what was the first? Oh, I remember what the first thing was. The first thing was I got to read one of your stories from Queer Saints Volume 1, and I was like, I love this. I love what this is saying. And it was so good to find something like that. It's like, it felt, I don't know, like it just resonated with me deeply. And then of course you did a submission for That Old House, the Bathroom, which was accepted and is in that. And it's just been, and I remember going through all of the craziness I did with those books, and you were just so kind to me and just so warm and loving. And it just was such an honor to work with you. And anyway, so very excited to be here. But yeah, let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about what you have going on right now, project wise.
Sure. Well, I also just wanted to say I really do appreciate that you responded so well to the story from Queer Saints, because it was I think a very divisive story. Based on the feedback that I saw, it was a very divisive story. So the fact that you resonated with it, I think, was really, really nice. That was my very, very first published short story. I've been making movies and everything for years, but I'd never had any of my fiction published before. So it was a very different experience to see the comments come in and read the reviews and be like, oh, so this is what people who don't know what queer, fat, positive art is like. What they think of it. So that's different.
Yeah.
But it was also really exciting because the people who liked it really did seem to really like it. So it's important for yourself. So I mean, I really am grateful for that. So it was really great to meet you that way. And then that led me to a couple. I'm actually working on a couple projects this year. Well, I'm finishing a couple projects this year, thankfully. I've been doing them for a while now. I have 2 feature films coming out this year that are, I think, crossing fingers, days away from actual completion. So that's
cool.
the goal. One is called A Taste of Youth, which is a feature film based on a short film that I made during the pandemic called Wasted on the Young. As you might expect, it is a lot about themes of aging and getting older, being unhappy with your lot in life. Focused specifically in the queer community, but also a little bit more universal as well.
Sure.
And then I'm also my other feature film that's coming out this year is The Brooklyn Butcher, because why did I not decide to do 2 feature films at the same time? That was a great idea in my head. So The Brooklyn Butcher is a horror anthology film that takes place all in one night. Every story is at the exact same time in the exact same apartment building, and every story is in a different apartment complex in that building. So it's a really that's a fun one because it's an homage to different horror. Every story is sort of an homage to a different genre or type of horror. There's a film there's a story that is an homage to Evil Dead, and a story that's an homage to House of Wax. You've got the folk horror, you've got the slasher, you've got supernatural, cosmic horrors in there. So it's a whole smorgasbord of horror, and I'm really excited for people to see that. And and I think I've mentioned it. I think you mentioned it when we talked about the That Old House, the Bathroom, when you had your launch podcast for that.
Yeah.
I also have a short film an adaptation of the short story that was from that book in here, The Court of King Dong, which is a lovely story about sex workers in a bathroom. So as
unique.
Why wouldn't you be? So, and I actually mentioned it to you, I think, once. I don't know if you remember that, but I'm actually also releasing my own collection of short stories this year. It's tentatively called Homophobias, but I'm not sure if I'm going to stick with that. But it's a collection of my own queer, fat positive horror stories, and it's very. If you liked Crumbs, you'll like this book. If you didn't,
I'm excited
you
then.
Like so,
yeah.
So there's a lot coming out this year, actually, for me. Plus, I also have the rest of my my horror series, Demon Doctor, is coming out this year for season 2.
Yeah.
So when I talk out loud, it's actually like, oh my goodness, what am I doing?
You're like, how do I try to breathe?
But it's so much fun. It's so much fun to do it. It's so much fun to work with the people I work with, and so wonderful when I get to cross over into new worlds like the world that you bring me into. So I am so grateful and excited to do that. So
yeah, I haven't. I know Steve watched the Brooklyn Butcher. I almost said that wrong. Almost butchered the name. And he spoke very highly of it to me. Like he seemed to really enjoy it.
And it's not even done yet when he saw it. So
okay. Even So and he and then I of course am more familiar, obviously with like the writing side, but I think one of the things that shines for me is it's very interesting to read something that can both have a message or a point, but also still be horror, because I don't think as much of that actually exists. I don't think very much of it does it well. And I felt like I remember, specifically with reading Crumbs, when I read it back when I was still doing those, I really need to do those again. I have overbooked myself though. So I've got to
I know the story, so trust me.
Oh my God. I came back from surgery and I was like, I would like no free time, but I remember specifically when I read Crumbs, the way that it made me feel when it was over, and how it kind of lingered, and I had to think about it. And it was one of those things and it doesn't show as much on camera because it was more thoughts after the fact of okay, because that was the first reading of it. I read most things blind. I never read anything before I read it on the podcast.
Which is interesting.
Which is really hard when you get to the people that use big words. You're just like, oh no, I want to edit the hell out of this. But no, I just remember that feeling. And I remember feeling not necessarily the exact same thing, but being just as contemplative and focused and engaged when I was reading, the story for why am I blanking the name? Crumbs. What's the one from the bathroom?
The Court of King Dong.
The Court of King Dong. How could I forget that title? Yes. So generic, I remember, and it's so insane. But I guess my point in saying that is the way that you convey a story through written word is so compelling and unique. And it's so I'm very excited for an opportunity to see that pushed more into the film, because I've seen some stuff on YouTube that you've done. And so to see something feature length, I'm very excited for that, because I think that's one of the reasons I love indie horror, but that's one of the reasons that I was so excited to work with you, and I look forward to other projects, is this just very unique take on this genre. And it's very exciting. So,
well, I am pretty sure that I can get you advanced copies of the films. I know the person who's putting them out, so I think I can help with that.
Great. So. Yeah, especially because you said that Steve hadn't seen the finished version, right?
Yes, I think
Yeah.
when he saw it, the color grading hadn't been finished, and also the score wasn't even there at all, and there was no Foley really. So
Oh, okay.
so he
Okay,
saw
got it.
basically just the assembly cut.
I
So
gotcha. Okay,
so
cool. Yeah. Well, I'm sure he'll be just as excited to see it like finished and everything else put in. But yeah, cool. So I'm going to put a link to everything possible that is related to Joshua in the description for this episode. So you can go check out Sidekick Productions. You can keep up with him on social media. You can, and that way you'll be in all of the cool clubs that we're in.
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, we're going to start with your list now. I think I'm familiar with 4 of the 5, but that doesn't mean I'm actually excited to talk about your first one because
Interest. Is that the one you don't know, or
that's the
is?
one I don't know. Is
Oh,
that surprising? Especially because I love black and white horror. But yeah, your first one was Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
I am I am surprised you haven't seen this one.
I'm surprised too. I looked it up and I tried to get it in before we sat down and I was not able to, but it is added on the list, I assure you, because I was like, oh, this sounds awesome. So, but yeah, this one I wasn't familiar with.
Well, you probably know a lot of it because of how it's in the cultural zeitgeist, to use the proper terms and everything.
Sure.
But
Right.
it's so parodied, it's so often, and so many different things. I mean, it's
Oh, okay.
there's so much of it that when you see it, you'll be like, oh my god! It's like somebody who's never seen Empire Strikes Back. But they watch it for the first time and they're like, "Oh wow! So all of these jokes make so much more sense
From
now."
yeah. Oh, that makes me even more excited to check it out. Yeah, no idea.
So I am pretty certain once you watch it, you'll fully realize it. Because it's a wonderful film, and if you haven't seen it, I highly encourage everyone out there to go and watch it. It is an incredible story. That is from that hagsploitation era of Hollywood. It's Joan Crawford and Betty Davis, and both of them are quote unquote past their prime. So both of them were able to make a movie, despite the fact that they despised each other in real life. And that probably makes the movie even better. Once you watch this movie, I highly encourage you to go watch Feud, the season of Feud with Betty and Joan. It was the first season of Feud, and it's a
Okay.
beautiful season of television
Okay.
with Jessica Lange and
Oh, I love her.
Susan Sarandon.
Oh,
And
I've heard of this. I haven't seen it, but I've heard of this. This is
don't
familiar.
watch that first. Watch this movie first.
Okay, can do.
But it is so good, and Betty Davis and Joan Crawford are just wonderful. Also, Victor Buono, which is one of the reasons that this is on here, is because it's one of the few films that has a fat character in it who is not treated in a terribly stereotypical way.
Sure.
And in Feud, Victor Buono is played by Dominic Burgess, who is
Okay.
a wonderful actor in genre television nowadays.
Mhm.
So once you see him, you'll recognize him from so many things because he's been in
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Flash, and he's been in Doctor Who, all sorts of things he's been in. So
Okay.
Victor Buono was somebody who I was able to see on television, well, on the screen. I watched it on my television. I didn't go to the cinema for it.
Sure.
So no, but it was exciting to see someone like him on screen. In a role that was not necessarily didn't take away from anything because of his size. Also, his size really had no factor in things. He was able to
Right.
be a character. He's obviously not the main character, and the real reason that this story is so exciting and this movie is so powerful is Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, and the two of them together just tell a beautiful story of a pair of sisters who love to hate each other, and
Oh,
that's it.
yeah.
Why does it resonate with me? Because I had trouble with this. No, I didn't have trouble, but I had trouble with the idea of what are the most influential horror films for me, because that
Yeah.
is something that you really have to think about, because what is it that sort of shapes who you are and determines
Yeah.
who you are. This is often pointed to as a piece of queer cinema. It's a queer classic. A lot of drag queens will use it in their acts
Okay.
for lip syncing to things.
Oh yeah.
Um, there's just a lot of there's a lot of camp in this movie. This is a hugely camp film.
Okay.
And as someone who can't help but write campy, even when I try not to, it comes out as camp. Everything I make is camp, even if I
Mm,
don't plan on it to be.
yeah.
Um, and side story on that, because my first season of Demon Doctor, I did not realize it was going to be campy. I put it out there
Okay.
for the audience to watch, and I was in there in the premiere, and everyone's laughing and having a great time, and I'm like, why are they laughing? This is a horror movie, a horror series. And then I realized, oh, so it's a campy horror series. Okay, well, that's who I am. And I get compared to people like John Waters a lot, to and how I work and the stories that I tell.
Yeah.
So I looked back at this and I realized that this is something I saw when I was younger, and
Mhm.
I realized, oh well, this is something that really resonated with me and I guess stuck with me in many ways. I mean, it's the characters take it so seriously. The characters, for them, this is life or death, literally.
Right.
But
Right.
for the audience, there is a bit of flair to it, and it's not. I wouldn't call it funny like laugh out loud. This is it's not a
Sure.
horror comedy in by any way, shape, or form, but it is
Sure.
definitely camp, and
Okay.
there's something great about that.
Okay.
And just the performances are so moving. I mean, Betty Davis gives such a it's so painful to watch her sometimes because of the descent into madness that she goes through. It's not really a spoiler because I mean she's mad from the beginning of the movie, but I mean it goes further into madness and all.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's just it's I watched this around the same time I watched Streetcar Named Desire for the first time,
Okay.
and both stories were like any good little gay boy. I looked up to these glamorous, insane women and wanted to be less like them. And so that's that. But I think a lot of what I do, and a lot of the now I'm just using the word zeitgeist for no reason. But a lot of what I do, I think a lot of what I write, a lot of what I create is because the culture that it was formed out of movies like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane,
Yeah.
that I was fed or throughout my queer upbringing and everything. The way I was introduced to the queer world was
Yeah.
through things like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and that's the one that I remember seeing first, and that's the one that I think. Even if I didn't see it, I would have
Mhm.
seen it because, like I said to you, it's really prevalent in mainstream
Right.
everything, really. So,
Yeah. No, I love hearing that. So first of all, anything that's black and white in horror, it's usually really surprising if I haven't seen it because I grew up on black and white horror. And it's been something that I revisit relatively often. So when I saw the list and I went back, I looked at the name and I was like, I don't think I know that one. I looked it up and I was like, wait a minute. I was like, how have I not? But and for anybody who's not super familiar with this film but would like to watch it, it is free on Vudu right now with ads.
mhm.
I have it on my Vudu so that I can watch it probably sometime this weekend, hopefully. And so it is on there for anybody interested in finding it. It was relatively easy to find and it's free. You don't have to pay for it or anything. So that's always a plus.
And if you, I mean, once you see this, you're going to want to watch a lot of other films from this era.
Yeah.
Joan Crawford did another one called Straight Jacket. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I have
Uh,
Straight Jacket, yes.
Straight Jacket's
Ooh,
another wonderful
okay.
one. Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte
I
was
don't know that one.
supposed to be another film with Joan Crawford and Betty Davis, but
Mhm.
Joan Crawford backed out after they started filming, so they replaced her with Olivia de Havilland, I think.
Okay.
Um, and then Olivia de Havilland did her own hagsploitation film
Okay.
called oh, I can't remember what I think it's Woman in the Cage or Lady in the Cage. It's about a woman who, on a very very hot day
Mhm.
in Los Angeles, she lives in this beautiful house that has an elevator that go instead of taking the stairs, she takes the elevator up. But it's one of those it's like a cage elevator in the middle of the living room, and it rises up to the second floor.
Okay.
And as she's rising up, her home is broken into by hooligans and these three young hippie, I guess they're meant to be hippies, and
I see. Okay.
and then she's trapped in the elevator in between the two floors, and they destroy her house the whole time, and they taunt her and torture her and everything, and
Oh,
it's another really
okay.
fun. It's a fun one if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I hadn't heard of the last two that you mentioned. That's what I meant. Straight
So
Jacket, yes, but not the other two that you mentioned.
So all of these are from that era,
Yeah.
because it was really popular at that time. I don't
Mhm.
know if Baby Jane started the idea of hagsploitation, but it became really popular around that era for older actresses who were really famous to take on these really B type movies
Yeah.
and sort of do something that was just very beneath them. Because I mean, both of the actresses, Joan Crawford and Betty Davis, are Academy Award winners. They were doing amazing things when they were younger, but then
Yeah.
as the system says, they aged out, quote unquote. So,
Yeah.
but I think it's really awesome to see that kind of thing because it gives. It was a film that was centered on older actresses, and
Yeah.
that's a really wonderful thing. A lot of what I do in my work, I try to make room for voices of people of all ages
Yeah.
as well, and I think it's really wonderful when films do that. Rightly or wrongly, I mean, this was maybe they didn't have fun making it because they hated each other, but it was definitely a fun movie to watch. And I think if they didn't hate each other, it would have been a fun movie to make. So
Yeah, fair enough. Wonder how much the hate comes to. I'll have to see if I bet it made it because they're supposed to be siblings that were child actresses or something,
one of
right?
them was a child actor.
One of
So
them was.
Betty
Okay.
Davis plays Baby Jane, who when she was younger, she was an actress in
Okay.
vaudeville.
Okay.
And as the pictures as it moved from vaudeville to pictures, that motion pictures that had lines and everything,
Yeah.
Jane didn't get any roles, but Blanche, who Joan Crawford's character, got all the parts, and so she became an actress as she got older, and Jane lost everything. So,
Oh, okay, I
uh,
got you.
but then
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
in a terrible accident, Blanche is paralyzed, and so Jane has to take care of Blanche for the rest of their lives together. And so Blanche is wheelchair bound, and
Okay.
Jane is the nutty woman who runs the home. So
Okay. Now I'm super intrigued. I'm probably gonna really like it. I'm excited to watch it.
I can't wait to hear what you think of it. Then you have to
Yeah,
tell me once
I'll
you watch.
message you right after. Yeah, so your second one, I don't know why this one surprised me, but I was just surprised this was on here, so I'm super intrigued. But that was An American Werewolf in London.
You know why this is on my list is because it was on Comedy Central all of the time when I was a kid. Uh, I
Really?
watched this so many times just because it was on Comedy Central all the
That's
time. I
crazy.
don't know why it was on Comedy Central all the time, but
Me
it was.
neither.
So it was always just on, and
Yeah.
I was so into the transformation sequence, especially. It was just
Oh,
so
yeah.
amazing to watch that, and it was just so. I just really loved the way all that happened and everything, but I also really loved the humor. And for me, I'm pretty sure you're not a fan of horror comedies very much.
Not normally.
But
There are plenty that I like, and actually, a horror comedy made it onto my influential list when I updated it recently. So there are ones that I'd enjoy. I think it's more of the parody, over the top silly that
so like a
I
scary movie you don't like.
yeah, those I can't get behind, but I think that, and I'm kind of learning that because I used to not give anything a chance if it said comedy in it, but
Mm.
now I'm learning that it really isn't. I think it's just because I got so burned. I hated the scary movies, like I hated them, and so, but no, so yes and no. I think I am a lot more particular and a little harder to please with them, but I've realized that it's as long as they're not like silly like that. I think I
Mm.
can give it a shot. You know?
Totally, I totally get that.
Yeah.
I what I love about American Werewolf in London is how the humor is used to diffuse the horror, and that's
Yes.
that. Because for me, that's I bring a lot of again, rightly or wrongly, or intended or not, I bring a lot of humor into what I make as a horror creator.
Yeah.
So, and I find that as I've learned to accept that about my voice as a creator,
Yeah.
I have more fun with it now, and I really love that I'm able to bring those moments of lightheartedness to really splice that together with somebody suddenly losing their head or something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what this movie is. I mean, I know why it was on Comedy Central in the sense that I guess it was funny, but it doesn't seem like a movie that Comedy Central would play. I
I
didn't
wouldn't have thought.
understand that.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
always confused why it was like this, and then after that, it was like I don't know, Porky's or something like that was on.
Yeah.
Which is like they don't go together at all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is, and as I've gotten older, I learned more about the movie. I learned how important the makeup effects were in this. Sort of in many ways revolutionary the makeup effects were.
Yeah.
And I'm not huge on movies that deal with mindless villains. I don't usually like that. Like,
Sure. Fair enough.
so werewolves are not usually high on my list of things to enjoy,
Yeah.
because I like when a character is it's much less scary when a character is, I mean, it's still scary if a wolf is attacking you, you're scared.
Sure. Sure.
But as far as a compelling villain,
Yeah.
I don't find a character who is sort of mindless to be compelling, which is why I sort of struggle sometimes with like Friday the 13th
Yeah.
and Halloween, because both of them are. I know people will probably fight me on this, but Jason and Michael are probably a little. I think they're a little mindless, and they're a little bit more just like driven by like I'm going to kill, and that's my.
That's the only layer. Yeah.
Versus Freddy, where you've got something like Freddy or Chucky, who is all like I've got a humor and I've got
Yeah.
humor and also reasons and things I'm going to do to make motivations and all that that are there. But you don't, and lest anybody says that there's a problem with it because of I'm just saying that Freddie and Jason and Michael don't speak, and that's why I'm not doing that at all, because I think Art the Clown is a very compelling villain. I know I saw today that you are not probably going to watch Terrifier ever,
No. That
but
doesn't change my absolute respect and admiration for it as a film or what it's done for the community. But yeah, it's just not my cup of tea. Yeah.
and that's fine. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very very gory. So
Yeah.
I'm not a huge gore fan overall,
Yeah.
but something about Art the Clown is just so compelling, and he's such a great I think he's the newest horror icon really out there. I mean,
Yeah. No, I would agree with that.
and
Yeah.
and he doesn't speak at all. So
Sure.
so
Has nothing to do with that.
you don't need to speak to be a compelling villain. But I
I
think when you've got something like a werewolf, which is clearly a mindless beast, unless I mean, I guess there are some interpretations where they're not like that, but overall,
Sure.
that's what it is. And an American Werewolf in London, that's sort of what it is. I mean, you become a mindless beast when you transform, but there's so
Right.
much of the movie that's just so much fun, and
Yeah.
there's so much of the movie that's unanswered too that I really
Yeah.
like the town that they stumble into at the beginning. It's just this random this town where everyone knows there's a werewolf there, but no one knows
Everyone.
anything about it, and we don't really ever talk about it or explain it. And
Nope.
it's like nowadays, if you did that, people would be furious. They'd be like, "What do you mean we didn't? This is a plot point that we didn't understand."
Yeah.
But I like it because it teaches you that it's okay to do things that are not what everyone else would do, and I think that's very interesting. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm a massive werewolf fan, but I will say I do tend to prefer werewolves that, like, typically and this is just kind of something I've noticed. So typically when it comes to werewolves, what I have noticed is when you have the ones that can change at will, I tend to prefer those as characters as opposed to the ones who are these like super good people, but then they, and it works different for me with Wolfman. Wolfman is iconic. I don't think I could I could never speak ill of that film or the remake. I love them both. But I think the difference is that the original Wolfman, Lon Chaney is the emotion. There's just so much more going on to it. And I think that in the remake, Benicio del Toro did an amazing job of doing that as well. I mean, obviously a slightly different take on Lawrence Talbot, but it was still very well done. And I think that to your point, with these characters, I always say that this makes so many people mad. An American Werewolf in London is more of a drama. It's very much more about like the relationships and these silly, quirky moments that make no sense, but for some reason we accept them. Like, you know, like, I mean, the scene, you know, when he's in the hospital and he's going through all the things, or like after he and I forget the nurse's name, when they sleep together and then he walks out and his friend is there just like following him around the apartment. And he's like, stop it. And he's like, closes the door. Like those moments, to your point, are very comical. And they do break up the horrendous situation of this like zombie looking character following you around after he's mauled by a werewolf. And now you're the werewolf. And it broke a lot of rules, I think. And it's still even like, I mean, even to this day, like when people talk about practical effects, this is like one of the top tier films that they reference. I mean, bright lights on the whole thing, like very, very visual, very extended scene of a transformation. And then I think the other thing that shocked me about this, the first time I ever watched it, is you sort of are set up to believe that the two friends are the main characters, David, and I'm blanking on the other guy's name, the best friend though. And then
yeah, I can't remember either.
I can't remember his name. I can remember David, obviously.
Charles, but I don't know if that's right.
I can't remember. So, but he dies within the first like 10 minutes, 15 minutes of the movie. And so I remember watching it being like, well, now what? Like, what now? And then it turns into like this more like love story, and there's all these other things. But I absolutely love this movie. It makes people mad because it's not on my top 5 werewolf movie list, but that's because I don't really think it's simply a werewolf movie. I think it's got some other things going on.
I think that's what I also like about it, and I think that speaks to what you're saying right now, is that it broadens what it means to be a horror film, because I think a lot of people tell me, because I know in The Taste of Youth, I've had a couple of actors who are telling me, well, this isn't really a horror film, it's more like a drama, and I'm like, it's a horror movie. I mean, horror doesn't just mean somebody coming and killing you all the time.
100%.
I mean, there's a lot of horror out there that has nothing to do with that. Look at Rosemary's Baby, which I is another movie that I should have put on my list, but I didn't. But Rosemary's Baby, people barely die in that one.
That's true.
There's
a lot of conversations.
Yeah, it's just lots of conversation with creepy atmospheric music, and a neighbor lady who is super, super annoying, but also
very annoying. Yes.
Or Misery. I mean, Misery is a horror film, and no one dies in that until the very, very end. So so horror doesn't just mean one thing, and I like that movies. I like movies that play with genre and play with expectations and of what you expect from that genre. So you're right. When this is not like The Wolfman, the American Werewolf in London, it's a movie that takes what you expect from a werewolf movie and does something a little bit different with it. Yeah, and I think that's pretty fun with it. That's. But so for a reason that's not on my list is because I just watched so much as a kid, and so because of that, I just couldn't help but have that as something that is always in the back of my head. Like, I've literally used that movie as reference points for both Brooklyn Butcher and A Taste of Youth in terms of what I'm looking for when to the colorist and the person, the composer for score.
Okay.
I use that in another movie, but I like the balance. I like the humor in the like American Wolf. Also, it's the humor of the music. I mean, the song that's playing when he's transforming.
I cannot.
Blue Moon. Yeah. I mean, it's this really fun, sweet song, and then it's silly.
Meanwhile,
and it's cheesy '50s song, and then all of a sudden, boom, he turns into this monster. And there's a humor there to that. And
agreed.
I mean, it's also horrific. He does such a good job of portraying that transformation, his pain and fear. It's just it's I love it. So
you completely
there's so many things about it that linger with me when I'm creating something, that even though I don't make werewolf movies, partially because the effects are very expensive. But
it's expensive to do monster movies. Yeah.
So
So
that's why that's on the list. Because it was an obvious one, because I tried to think about the first movies that I saw and that were horror and what stayed with me, and that's one of them, because I use it all the time as a reference point for people. I also really like to as a creator, I really like 80s horror in a contemporary space. So like taking
Okay.
the sensibilities of 80s
Yep.
horror and bringing it to a contemporary audience. I think I'm realizing now as I get a little bit more into my creations that that's sort of what I'm into, and
Okay.
because there's something fun about 80s horror that you don't get necessarily in a lot of later horror after that. Even I mean, I love movies. I love horror movies from the 90s and 2000s. There's so many
Yeah.
amazing ones, but they're not always that fun.
Sure. Different.
Um,
It's just different. Yeah.
yeah, and I guess
Yeah.
one of the things I like about horror is from the 80s is that there's a lot of fun to be had in that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of I guess it's the camp. I like the camp.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good one. I really like that film. I revisiting it even now, it really just is incredible how well it holds up, and it's a testament to the work they put into those effects and everything.
Mhm.
It's still really good. Yeah. So your third one is the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I know some people might argue this is not horror, but it's literally in the title, so I refuse to
It
accept.
absolutely is. It's a horror musical. That's like a whole subgenre.
It is. I love horror musicals. I mean,
Me
I made a horror
too.
musical, so
I love horror musicals. Yes.
Sweeney Todd is my absolute favorite musical ever created. So, and then I love Reefer Madness. I mean, that was just so much fun as a musical.
What
Uh,
about Repo, the genetic opera?
I love Repo.
Oh,
It's so ridiculous, and I love
it's so
everything about
ridiculous.
it.
I love it so much, though.
It is. It's so much
It's
fun.
an
But
obsession.
it all started because of Rocky Horror for me.
Rocky. Yeah.
I mean, like any good little queer kid, I was Halloween night. I saw Rocky Horror for the very first time. I get it
Okay.
on Comedy Central, so I guess I watched a lot of Comedy Central as a kid. I didn't even I didn't really, but apparently everything I'm quoting about is on that. So, but I watched it the first time on Halloween. And I was just blown away. I'm like, what is this? I mean, this is incredible. Uh, to there shocker, there was not a lot of queer representation growing up. So seeing a movie like this, which flat out has queer representation in the 70s, so
Yeah.
it's just. Plus, the songs are amazing. Plus, the performances are amazing. This is camp times a million, and yet everyone takes it so seriously inside of it. Like they know what
Yes.
they're making, but they're also being serious about it. So
Yes.
how
Yeah.
can you not love that? And Tim
Yeah.
Curry is everything. I mean, he's
Yeah.
Tim Curry's for people like my age. Tim Curry is a big part of their childhood. I mean, he was
Yeah.
everywhere. He was
That's
Pennywise. He was the demon in Legend, or Satan, whatever you want to call him in Legend.
yeah. The
Uh,
Butler and Clue.
the Butler and Clue. That's why I'm not excited by the Clue remake, because I'm like, there's no way they're going to top what they just did with that
God,
cast.
no. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. I love that
It's
movie.
it's superb. It's just
Yeah.
I love Clue
He's
so much.
phenomenal. Yeah, he's phenomenal.
But as Frankenfurter, he just makes so many choices. It's like, where did this choice come from? It's so brilliant. Oh my god! And then I mean, this is talk about something that's part of culture. I mean, this is parodied and joked about and present everywhere. I mean, Glee did an episode based on Rocky
Yeah.
Horror, and
Yeah.
some will
True.
say they did it okay, and some will say rightly that they did not. But that's another story. Never mind. Anyway, it's just Rocky Horror stays with you. Rocky Horror, the songs are always going to be in your mind when you
So
watch it.
true.
You can't not hear them. The songs.
No.
Time Warp is everywhere. Time Warp's at weddings. Time Warp is a
It
wedding song.
literally, I've heard it in places like out shopping before. It just plays. It's literally everywhere. And then it's inevitable. Like if you like miss the beginning of it, right? And you just hear, you like have to go and then listen to the whole thing. It's mandatory. Like you have to. Yeah. So good.
It's without question. And
Yeah.
it just will always be such an important part of my growing up, because
Yeah.
seeing something like that and seeing that what's capable, and it makes you want to make something like that. It makes you want to
Yeah.
um, realize, and to talk about your point about making something that's horror that also says something. I mean, Rocky Horror is not just a silly musical. There's a lot there's a lot there about identity and being who you are, and sometimes it's a little bit heavy-handed in the lyrics, but it's a musical, so of course it's going to be heavy-handed in the lyrics.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot there to really love and value and look at as ridiculously important to people of my generation growing up and watching horror. That's what it is, and it's so remarkable to know how they made it, because it's so cheaply done in many ways. And it's a testament to just doing something that is able to capture your vision, regardless of the obstacles in front of you for it. So
yeah, I was late to Rocky Horror. I don't think I saw it until I was like a young adult, like probably maybe early 20s. But I remember it's a film. I feel like even if you were to first watch it now, I feel like it leaves an impact. I don't think, and that's the thing is like I wouldn't say it was really before its time. I think it's just timeless.
yeah,
Like I think it works regardless of what time frame you're looking at, whether it's 70s, 80s, 90s, or now. And I think that makes it really special in a very unique way, because films like this in concept don't always last the hands of time as far as like their message, or like sometimes something that seems like super profound, you watch it and you're like, that's canceled. Like, you go back and you're like, not what I remembered about this at all. And so, but it's not like that. It's timeless. And I like it actually just made its first appearance on the Five Influential series a couple weeks ago for the first time. And I couldn't believe it, because as many episodes, as there has been, I was surprising to me that it had not come up yet. And I always love it. Like I always say, like some people are like, oh, I try to do things that aren't on. It's like, it doesn't matter though, because even if you and I made a list of the same 5 movies, we're not going to say the same things about them anyway.
Yeah.
So it's all different. But yeah, no, Rocky Horror is just iconic. It's such a great film.
And it's the kind of movie that has to be it speaks to an independent movie creator, because you're not gonna if you take that story and brought it to somebody in Hollywood today, they would look at you and think you have 3 heads and throw you out the window.
Yeah, no, you're right.
They would be like, "What are you talking about? This is insane. Just leave my office, please, and never come back." You couldn't do this kind of. I don't mean that in the sense of like you couldn't do this because you call it. No,
right?
I'm talking about like Hollywood wouldn't take the risk. They wouldn't take the. They wouldn't be. They wouldn't. They would think it's an absurd story that's not based on an IP, so therefore we have no interest in it. So and I think that this is the kind of thing that tells independent movie makers, hey, go and follow your dreams and your passions and have a strong point of view. That's another thing I get from this. When you're making a movie, don't cater to the people who don't cater to everyone. Cater to your vision, and if you don't, you're not going to say anything, and people aren't going to watch it. But because they did when they made this movie, everyone watches it. I mean, it's just such an incredible film in that sense as well. So
yeah, no, it's a great one for sure. Let's see. Oh, your next one. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a theme, I think. Your next one is
it's the ones that influenced me the most, as a creator. So.
Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead is this is probably more parody than you might like. I don't know how you feel.
No, I actually love this movie.
Oh, well, good then. Fabulous.
This film,
even if you didn't, I loved it anyway. So.
It feels realistic to me. I feel like if you dropped real humans in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, this is how they would act. Like it just feels very realistic.
I mean, first of all, Nick Frost is such an important actor to me because of all of the roles that he does that are aren't determined about his size.
Sure.
And for me, as somebody who doesn't have a lot of people to look at who can do that,
Yeah.
I mean, he's played some really, really different characters that his size has nothing to do with what it is,
No, you're right.
which is so rare in Hollywood and so rare
Yeah.
in movies.
Yeah. No, for sure.
And I mean, he's even played parts like I didn't watch it, but my boyfriend did. There was a show called Into the Badlands that he was a kung fu fighting monk, I think, in it, and it's like who would cast Nick Frost as a kung fu fighting monk and yet he did, and he had fight scenes and everything, and they were it wasn't played for laughs. It was straight up. It was like
It
a
was for real. Yeah, good.
so
That's awesome.
so that's the kind, and that's what I try to do with what I make is I try to make movies with for those who I don't think I was very clear about it. A lot of what I make is well, all of what I make is considered fat positive film and television and stories as well. Everything you'll read in that I write is fat positive. So spoiler alert for homophobia is if you read my collection, they're all fat positive stories. So I try to create rules and cast people in them regardless of what their body types are. And so if it's a romantic lead, it doesn't matter that they don't have to look like what you consider to be a romantic lead. They can look like, and they often do look like me. So that right there, that's such an important reason for me to watch and love this movie and feel inspired by it, because Nick Frost was doing a lot of what I wanted to do when I was still in college when this movie came out, so I did not I wasn't really making anything at the time. I was still learning about what I wanted to do with my life, so I watched this movie. But when I watched this movie, I mean, this was just I love British things to begin with, and then I watched this movie, and I was in the cinema all alone, because that's the kind of person I was back then. I would just go to the movies alone, and I was just blown away by it. I'm like, this is hysterical. First of all, it's just so funny. It's so ridiculous and so much fun. And they have such great chemistry. The performers are just everyone top down. The performers are all just so delightful, and they all make so many interesting choices. Just so many interesting choices. Just even the minor characters, like the annoying character who he works with, who's like who the bad employee at the job that Simon Pegg works at. They're all just such bizarre and quirky and fun characters, and the effects in this are all good. I mean, they're all, I believe, almost all of them were practical, if not all of them were practical.
I think so.
And it's just so much fun. How could this is the kind of movie that I would want to make if I could, with that kind of budget, because I mean, there's just so much fun in it, and that's again, I guess you're right. There's a pattern in that. I like movies that are horror and also fun, or at least that's what stay with me. And that's what linger with me. There's plenty of dark and depraved movies that I love. Like I didn't put Hellraiser on my list, but Hellraiser is another. Hellraiser almost made my list. Because again, for me, another really important aspect is sex positivity and sexuality, and expressing sexuality in film in a way that people don't like or aren't comfortable with. And so that's why Hellraiser almost made my list, because I didn't.
Oh yeah, that would have made sense. Yeah.
But I only had 5, so I had to pick 5. But I just snuck a 6th one in there. Surprise everybody. That's what I do. I'm surprised. I am. But Shaun of the Dead was. Yeah. It's one of those movies that just stuck with me for so long after I watched it in the cinema, and I just had so much fun watching it. I couldn't wait to share it with other people, and I love everything about it. It's such a fabulous and fun movie from beginning to end. I can't really criticize it. I mean, there's just so much. There's so much to love in it, and there's so much humor in it, and it's universal because it's obviously a very British movie. But there's so much about it that Even if it's British, it doesn't matter. I still get all the nuances and the jokes, and
Yep.
maybe I don't get every little thing, but for
Sure.
me, I'm laughing when they want me to laugh. So that's
Yeah.
what matters. And is it a scary film? No, it's not scary really. It's really not. But I don't think we've seen zombie movies that are scary. We've
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of zombie movies that are scary.
Yeah.
This is a nice take on it. That's different. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, Shaun of the Dead is a great film. It's got incredibly high rewatch value in my opinion, and it's never, no matter how many times I've seen it, because I've seen it a lot, it's never not funny. It never not makes you feel good when you're watching it. I would say this is definitely on a top list for me for just feel good movies. You know, if you're just in a place where you just really need to watch something that's just going to make you feel better than you've been feeling all day, like this is a great movie for that.
1000%. But also what I love about, and this is something that this is probably another reason it really sticks with me. The scene with his mother in the bar, when he finds out and everything, that's brutal. It's such a brutal scene, and I mean that in a positive way. But it's such a brutal scene to. And I got emotional when I watched it, and I'm like, why am I getting so emotional at this?
Oh, I know, yeah.
Comedy, but I did, and I still get emotional when I watch it. I mean, it's just such a beautiful set of performances from all the actors involved, and they've done something that earns that. And what I love about that is how you can take this movie that's a straight up horror comedy, and you can do something that really guts you, and really just and shows you how genre isn't so rigid in that it has to be this way. Genre is not just this is what if this is a horror comedy, you have to stay within these rules. No, do what you want to do with it. And at that moment, you've earned the arc where you want us to cry with you, as you have to do what you have to do to your mother. So
yeah. That's true. Yeah, it does a really good job. I mean, and even before that scene, I think it does a really great job of making you care about the people, like just in general. Because and to your point, I know you said this, but like their chemistry, the way they work together, it's just so believable, and you find yourself so attached to them. So that it's exactly like what you're saying. So that when that moment comes, you're just like you're gutted because you are invested in these characters, in Sean and his mom and everybody. It's like, so when that happens, yeah, it hits a lot harder because you genuinely care about what's going on. Yeah,
it's just it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah,
It's good. If everyone hasn't heard me say that, it's good. So
it's so good.
so good.
All right, well, that takes us to your last one, which is one of my big ones, and that's Scream.
This was hard because I didn't want to put this because I'm like, everybody puts Scream. I'm sure everyone says Scream.
Not everybody.
But this is one of the first like straight up horror movies that I remember ever. I tried to think about movies that I watched as a kid.
Right. Yeah.
And this was one of the first horror movies I remember watching that was like billed as a horror film, like American Werewolf in London. It's on Comedy Central. You're not going to see Scream on Comedy Central.
No.
Rocky Horror Picture Show, it was on Comedy Central. You're not going to see that or Scream on Comedy Central. I said that again twice now. We're just reiterating the fact that Scream's not on Comedy Central.
Not on Comedy Central.
It's somewhere else, but not on Comedy Central. Well, right now it's on Paramount, I think. Paramount Plus streaming. So, but it's. I remember that my mother rented two movies, and one was The Birdcage and one was Scream. And we, I don't know why she rented Scream because she's not a horror fan. I remember her telling me that she saw The Exorcist in the theaters, and she had to leave like in the first half hour because she was terrified. I'm like, in the first half hour? Why would they didn't even get to the bedroom yet? So
yeah.
Whatever. Okay, Mom. But so she was not a horror fan, so I don't know why she rented Scream. I have no idea why she did. But, so we put Scream on and we watched like the first 10 minutes with Drew Barrymore and everything, and then she shut it off. And we put on The Birdcage. So we watched The Birdcage as a family, and then she's like, "You can finish this in your room." So I did. I watched Scream in my room after everybody went to bed, and then I watched Scream the next morning before she returned the movie to the wherever we rented it from. I can't remember where we rented it from. The movie store, though, the video rental store that doesn't exist anymore because video rental is unheard of anymore. Who what's a video rental store?
Yeah.
But it was such a up to that, because again, growing up, you didn't really have we didn't have like HBO and Showtime and things like that as a kid.
Sure.
I didn't have those things, so I didn't actually watch a Child's Play or Friday the 13th or any of those movies as a kid because I didn't have access to them. I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up in the mountains in a very small town, and we rented the movies my mother rented. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I didn't have access to these movies, so I was
Mhm.
lucky that I saw things like what you saw on my list on Comedy Central. Because thank you, Comedy Central. This is now an advertisement for Comedy Central, everybody. Please, Comedy Central, sponsor Voices from the Mausoleum.
That's right.
But regardless of that, this was like the first honest to goodness slasher I think I saw.
Okay.
And I mean, I was a little over. I was about 13 years old when this came out, so it's not really the weird age to be watching a slasher for the first time. I mean, I think probably a lot of people don't watch them much younger than that. So, well, maybe if I had a child, I would be like, oh, sit down and watch this. It's Friday the 13th. Enjoy it. It's funny. Just laugh at Jason. Go ahead. It's on Comedy Central. No. I have to stop doing that. I don't know why I'm doing that. I'm a little loopy right now. I don't know why. But so I watched. This is like the first slasher I saw, and first of all, it's also really funny. I mean, there's so much about Scream that's so funny, and yes, I might not have seen a lot of slashers, but I knew at that age I knew the tropes and everything. I mean, everybody knows the slasher trope and everything. I mean, it's in all television and all everywhere. So you see that. So I got all the jokes and the meta humor and everything they were doing. I understood all of that. And so first of all, it's just really funny. But then it's such a fun movie, and I mean, the kills are fun. They're creative. The characters again take themselves seriously.
Yeah.
But also the movie is also kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then the ending with as I get older, I realize now that there's a nice homoerotic undertone to the ending between Billy and Stu. That as a young queer boy, I did not really necessarily understand that at the time.
Yeah.
But I think that I see that a little bit more now. But it's just so good, and it created a franchise that I love every Scream movie. I mean, I can't help but love every Scream movie. They're so much fun, and this started it all. And I look at this. This is really the slasher. This is the slasher franchise of my generation, really. So because of that, this grew up with me, and the characters grew up with me, and I relate to it a lot. I mean, as a millennial, we're very meta in many ways in what we do. As a millennial, the work we create is very meta and referential in many ways. So I think that I am a product of this as a person, because this is a product of our culture in many ways. And it's such tremendous rewatch value. I mean, a movie that I think a lot of the movies on this, I think all of the movies on my list are movies that have massive rewatch value, and that's, I think, a reason that's also influential to me, is that these are movies that stay with you and make you want to watch them again, even though I know exactly when somebody's going to pop out of the closet in this scene because I've seen it 3,000 times.
Sure.
And it ages fairly well. I don't think that there's anything terribly I mean, everyone in it is beautiful, so that's one of the things I would change if I were making the movie today.
Make it more realistic.
I don't even mean beautiful, because I think that properly everyone should understand that I think that beauty is seen differently depending on the person involved.
Sure.
When I say everyone in it is beautiful, I'm referring to the fact that this is what Hollywood would consider beautiful. So
yes.
Just to clarify to any of your listeners who might not know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I think that I think that's one of the things I would change. But it's such a fun movie, and it's such a ride, and the characters are so interesting, and they make you want to watch them. And again,
Yeah.
they make. I mean, some of like Jamie Kennedy's deliveries. I'm like, what are these deliveries? They're absurd, and I love them so much. This is
He's
just
my favorite.
bizarre. But and Gail Weathers, I mean, is such such an icon for all of us. So we all wanted to be Gail Weathers.
Sure. Yeah.
But and also, I mean, she eventually gave us Parker Posey. So I mean, I love my
Oh,
Parker Posey.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the only thing I don't like about Scream 3 is we don't get more Parker Posey. She ends up dying. So
She's a
but
riot. Yeah.
spoilers, everybody, if you didn't see Scream 3. um yeah, Scream is influential to me because I think it's a product of my generation, and also reflective of who I am as a creator in many ways. And also, again, much like all of the other films on this list, for the most part, it plays with genre and makes genre genre do what it wants rather than being rigidly stuck to the genre.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I wasn't quite old enough to see this when it first came out. And I don't know, because 2 came out really not that long afterwards.
It was
But
really close, yeah.
yeah, it was really fast. But other than that, these were all movies that, the other ones that came out later, like though I saw those in theaters. And this was one of my first full horror franchises I got to experience as an entire thing without coming into it late.
Mhm.
I watched this pretty young. But that's it. I had an older sister that just let me watch whatever I wanted to watch. And so there we are. But it turned out to be fine because that's why we're here now. And
Exactly.
and it's funny because you had said, when you were younger, not picking up on the things between Stu and Billy. But I think a lot of it, is because it just wasn't something that you saw ever. So you sort of just assumed it didn't exist, right? Like that sort of those little the things that are there. You sort of just dismiss it so easily because, well, why would that be there? It's not normally, right? So but yeah, when I talk about being a younger queer person and seeing things that really made me feel less crazy, because I grew up in a Southern Baptist house, so not allowed to be those things. And so I think this was one of the first times when I got a little bit older that I realized that this was a little more open to those kinds of things, and seeing that relationship the way that it was, toxic as it may be. It is one of the ones I put in my bucket of representation that I think did impact the way I saw myself, because it was like on in a movie, and again, I was quite a bit older, but I didn't come to terms with any of those things about myself until a lot later in life, because I felt I had to repress it all. And so it was much later. But this is one of the ones that I always put in that bucket, because I remember when it clicked for me, it was one of those things where it was kind of like, that might be one of the reasons I like this so much. Like it's something, it felt comfortable, and it felt like it just gave me a sense of self, but I don't think I realized why until I was a little bit older. So Scream is, I think for my updated influential, I may not have included it. Honestly, I can't remember, which is terrible. But to your point, you come up with a list and you got to knock it down, right? If you're trying to get it down to 5, but it's just one of my favorite franchises. I was not as happy with 6 as I wanted to be. And I'm not too sure about the rest of it and anything that comes after. But as a franchise, it's always been very meaningful to me. It's my best friend and I's franchise. It's the franchise we go see together in the theaters when they come out in our Ghostface shirts, the 9, like we're like ready for Scream. And it's just something that's always been really meaningful to me, because it's also a part of my relationship with other people. And so it's always been a very special movie to me too, which is why when there are people that are like serial movie haters, and like Scream always comes up on those lists, and I'm always like, stop it. Like, no.
I really don't like those serial movie haters anyway. Like the people who make the worst of lists. I'm just like, why do we do this? Why are we doing that? let's celebrate things, and if we didn't like it,
What we
let's
like.
not really talk about it if we didn't like it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's plenty of movies that aren't on my influential list that I'm not talking about. So
100%. And I think that there's an approach where you can have just a
yeah.
quick thought on that, where if you don't like something, but you do want to talk about it, I think that there is a better way to do it. But you will never catch no worst of list. I will never do a worst film, worst book. No, I don't believe in doing that. I think it's not, first of all, it's not helpful. It's not necessary. Find something else to talk about. Like, there's so much media that I love. I'd rather focus on that. And if it's not something I love or something that not resonates with me, I genuinely want to know, well, why did it resonate with you? Why was it something that you loved? Talk me through it. And my mind has been changed. That has happened. So anyway, yeah, I don't like them either. But Scream is one of those ones I feel like that it gets like,
It does, yeah. And that's even why I was like reluctant to put it in this, because I'm like, first of all, it seems so obvious for a millennial to put Scream down, but it is. I mean, it is. It's. I think also as you grow up, I mean, characters like Jamie Kennedy's character Randy and the other and then the subsequent other film film nerds from in the series, like those are all us. I mean, that's we're seeing ourselves on screen, and what is it? I do accept representation. That's what I care about so much, is representation.
yeah.
And having characters who are more than just the random nerd, but also the nerd who is the horror nerd. I mean, what is that? That's wonderful. I mean,
I
we
love
should
it
be
so
loving
much.
that. So
Yeah. I think, yeah, he is like, I can't say that I was quite like him because I was a lot more reserved back in my high school days. And
same, yeah.
even in college, I'm very reserved. And really kind of now it's just, it just depends on the circumstance. But that was who I was on the inside. And that was definitely who I wished I could have been on the outside if I'd had the confidence, because he just confidently is the way he is.
Mhm.
And people give him a hard time. They're mean to him, but he's always around anyway. It's great.
He was part of the cool kids, even though he
I,
was not. So
I know. And he makes it to the sequel. I mean, obviously that's it, but he makes it to the sequel.
he even gets a talking head in the third one.
Yes. And his character directly builds into other characters in 5 and 6. Like, gotta love it, man. And then they had characters, the trope equivalents or whatever you want to call it, in 4. They just weren't as compelling. They worked. I didn't dislike them. I actually really liked 4, but it was
I like
one of
4.
those,
No, I do. I
yeah,
like 4 because it was different.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, I like them all, really. I do.
Yeah.
I know why people didn't like 6.
Yeah.
My biggest thing with 6 is I would have loved them to use New York more as a character.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be bigger than what it
Because
was.
as somebody who lives in New York, I'm like, oh, I really
I forget that. Yeah, you live up there where Steve lives. Yeah.
and it just says that if you're gonna put something in New York, and you have a big budget, you should do something with New York. Like make it exciting in some way. Because New York is such a character, and I think it can be such a creepy and scary place in a horror film. And you also don't see a lot of horror movies in New York, really.
No.
Because
No.
they're usually in the woods or in small towns. Because
Sure.
having grown up in a small town, it's a very scary place. So.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, I think I actually predicted the killers like very early in the movie. And that was actually one of my biggest disappointments about it, because I was like, you're not supposed to be able to do that. So I felt disappointed. I thought they were going to go in different directions than they did, but either way.
There was a lot of weird possibilities with it, and I'm like, I wonder what they're going to do. This could be, but then they didn't go in the directions I thought. So, but that's okay.
No, all that stuff was misdirection. I think there's a lot of misdirection, and it worked for some people, didn't work for some, but it doesn't change the love that I have for it as a franchise. It doesn't change that.
Absolutely, no. It's such a good franchise, and it all starts with number 5 on the list, Scream. So
yeah, that's where it starts. That's great. So yeah, the only movie on your list I hadn't seen is What Happened to Baby Jane, so I'm gonna have to watch that, or Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
I'm disappointed. I should have tried harder to find movies that were influential that you hadn't seen before. So
You've probably seen so many movies I haven't seen too. I know you probably have, because my like scope is like really narrow. Like I grew up on very specific old things. And then as I got older, I only watched the cool, edgy, popular stuff. And so
Mm.
now, post 30s, getting closer to 40, I'm really diving into just like everything, because I'm like, I just want to see everything. So it's except Terrifier. But
It's fun. Terrifier is a lot, so I
yeah,
understand why.
yeah. So
But you're a fan of the Saw series, aren't you?
I am. I love so Saw is an influential movie for me. Yes. Saw was my first. I'll keep it short because it's not about me. But Saw was the first movie I ever saw that left me just a mess. Like the first time I saw that, I was literally I was in high school, pretty young high school, if I'm remembering correctly. And I was broken after I saw him get up off the floor that first time.
Oh my
I was
goodness, that
and
reveal.
and I'm telling you, like to this day, nothing has made me feel the way that made me feel. Like I literally, it sounds like I'm a cartoon character, but I swear, I literally melted off of my couch onto the floor with my mouth open, staring at my TV screen.
It
Like
was I because I saw it in the cinema, and
I
I
didn't
was
get to
I
see it
was
in
just
theaters. I
like
was
I
too
was like
young.
I
Yeah.
can't believe this is happening. This is
And, learning about it, later in life, and knowing that the budget was that what he really laid there. Like, it's just so never in a million years would I have thought that. And it was also what I would consider my sort of like my gateway drug to like realizing that I liked darker, more I don't want to say sophisticated because that's not really what I mean, but more involved stories. And then
yeah.
leading into, because in my opinion, the first one's not actually that gory. It doesn't really start
It's
pushing
not gory. The first one's not gory.
yeah, there's like a bucket of blood, maybe the whole movie,
But
right? And then the
it
one
gets
scene,
very gory later on.
it does. 3 is when it just goes bananas with the gore. And I remembered watching it. 3's got one of my favorite traps in it. I like it being kind of the starting point of like, I don't really mind gore too much, but to me, it just has to feel like it has a purpose. And I think,
Sure.
and I think not that I look at people weird who like it. If it's mindless, that's fine. It's entertainment. And if it entertains you, it entertains you. It doesn't matter to me. But it was just a stepping stone for so many things for me. And I just will never forget the way it made me feel when I watched it the first time. Never.
I can totally understand that. That
Yeah.
ending was mind blowing. It was like watching The Sixth Sense again.
Yes. Yes.
Because again, I was really young when I watched The Sixth Sense, and that was
I
just
was
a mind
really
blowing
young.
experience. I'm like, what is this? Oh my, he's dead the whole time.
I was so
Spoilers.
scared.
Uh,
That movie scared the bejesus out of me. The
but
first time I watched it.
but definitely it was. Yeah, there's so many horror movies that I could have put on this list that I just love horror. You're right. During the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic, I was furloughed for about 6 months, and I did very little except I did a lot of things, but what I did at night was watch probably 3 horror movies a night before I went to bed.
Yeah.
So I've been through all of Amazon Prime and into the depths of
Yep.
Amazon Prime, which is very dark at times. There are some things on there that they're just very dark.
I
I've
can
seen some
only imagine.
amazing films, some films that I'm like, why am I watching this? But I will finish it because that's how I behave when I watch a movie. But yeah, I just love horror as a genre so much. I just saw Immaculate last night. Immaculate was immaculate. It was just amazing. It really was. I
I
love.
can't wait to see that. I'm gonna have to
Oh,
wait till it's out on rental or streaming. But
you can rent it on Prime now.
Is it?
It's on
Is
Prime
it
for $10. So
10? Okay, 10's not bad. 10's not bad. I know sometimes
yeah. I'm sure if you wait a little bit longer, it'll be cheaper. But I mean,
the normal one.
if you want it now, it's on there. I just saw Glorious on Shudder the other day too. I don't know if you've seen that.
Is that the bathroom one?
That's the bathroom one, yeah. Which
The
I wanted to do
purpley.
the whole time. I'm like, did Angel use this as inspiration for?
I watched it not long before I did come up. I actually had the bathroom stories idea in my head for a long time right before, but yeah, I watched it being like, see, scary. That literally takes place only in a bed. There's like only a few
Open
minutes
is in the
outside.
bathroom.
Yeah,
Like
it's wild. That was a
3 minutes
crazy
are
one.
not in, like 10 minutes maybe at the most of the movie are
At the
not in the
most. The
bathroom.
rest of it is in. Yeah, no, that one was that's a wild, entertaining. Like that one
It
that was a
is,
really
and
fun
talk
movie.
about another fun little twist at the end that I didn't quite see coming
No,
until
me neither.
but then once they started to reveal, I'm like, oh, I got it now. But
Yeah, right. I'm with you. Yeah, same thing. Yeah,
I'm
same
with you,
thing.
but I didn't know that up until then. So
Yeah, that's a good one. I watched that, I think, when it first came out. I used to be a lot faster at stuff. I'm not anymore. Now I just try because I started getting burnt out trying to keep up with everything. So there's so much
it's
now.
hard because there
Yeah.
were like 4 movies came out at the same time this year. Because I wanted to see the first Omen. I haven't seen that yet. I wanted
Yeah.
to see Immaculate in the cinema. I didn't get to see that. I wanted to see Abigail. I haven't been able to see that yet.
That's on my list too.
I did get. Did Lisa Frankenstein come out this year, or was that
It
last year?
did. Yep.
So I
This
did
is
see Lisa Frankenstein. I got to see that. So,
I saw it on Peacock.
there's
Yeah.
so many of them coming out now, and I'm not like the variety articles which are like horror is dying because there's too many movies coming out now that are horror. It's like
Oh
no,
yeah.
no. There's plenty of wonderful horror. I wanted to go see Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey too, because
Oh yeah.
I think that it looks like they stepped up the makeup and everything, and I'm
I've
really
heard
excited
they
about
have.
that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the first one was a movie that I'm glad that people liked it. And then the second one, though, I'm genuinely excited for it. So I
Yeah.
can't wait to see it. So
Yeah.
but they all
I
come out like back to back to back, and I'm like,
they
I'm trying to
are.
make movies at the same time. I don't have time to go see other movies. What am I gonna do? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't I'm technically, I mean, for all intent and purposes, I'm a single mother. My partner and I do not live together yet. And soon, thank God. But for now, it's just me and my kid, and it's very difficult to just go to the theater, and it's not something I can just do. I mean, I've got very lucky. He's super into Godzilla, so we went and saw that because I could take him to see it. But other than that, I don't get a lot of opportunities to just go to the theater, and so if I a lot of times I have to wait, and that gets overwhelming too because in the time that those movies are taking to get to streaming, there's all this other stuff that just came out on streaming too that's brand new, and I make priorities for certain things. Like I'm definitely going to go see Trap in theaters.
yeah, that looks really
I
enjoyable. I'm
I'm
excited for
gonna
that.
make that a priority. I know that I know that this is such a controversial thing, but I will also absolutely be in theaters to see The Crow when it finally releases. And so there's some other things here and there, but a lot of times if it's not kid friendly, I don't get to go see it in theaters. And so by the time it's on streaming, it's already a million other things. It's so hard to keep up with it all.
It
Um,
is. It
yeah.
is. But also, I kind of think it's pretty awesome how much horror is out there now that
It's a
people can.
good problem to have. Oh yeah.
It's so much fun that there's
Yes.
amazing things
Yes.
out there. If when you get a chance to watch it, you should watch Saint Drogo as well. You should add that to your list.
What is it? Say it again.
Saint Drogo.
Logo. Okay.
It's made by a queer production company in Providence, and they've been doing a great job on the festival circuit right now with that movie. But it's really, if you've seen The Wicker Man, there's a lot of Wicker Man elements in it. It's a nice tale of folk horror. It's very very queer, which is always a great thing about that. I don't know if you saw Death Drop Gorgeous, the drag queen slasher film that came out a couple years ago.
No, I've seen stuff about it. I know it's something that was on my radar to watch.
That's the
Is
same
it?
people made that. Yep, that's it. Yep.
Okay. I got it.
Because
I'll have
the
it.
same people who made Death
Oh,
Drop Gorgeous.
I follow him on Twitter.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, because I told him to reach out to you because of his book just came out. So
Oh, good. He hasn't yet, but that's great. Yeah. We'd love.
he's got a lot of things he's doing in that regard. But yeah,
Yeah. No, that's
he just
awesome.
wrote
'Cause
he wrote a body horror
love that.
aquatic horror story novel, so called The White Bishop, I believe. So
God, I love aquatic horror.
so.
I'm actually currently writing a shark book.
My boyfriend will love that then. 'Cause my boyfriend loves B horror movies that are shark movies.
This
So.
is if I can pull it off, I think it will be a pretty wild story. And it started as a short that I was going to do for a shark charity anthology that kind of blew up when the owners ended up not being very good people. But I found one of the cover artists that I follow on Twitter had this beautiful aquatic cover, and I was like, I really need that. Like, it's so pretty. And then I was like, oh my God, I could finally like revamp my story and like turn it into something bigger. And it's been good. So it's been a fun experience writing it, because I'm still new to the writing thing in this sense anyway. I'm used to like a different style of writing.
Sure,
But
yeah.
as far as like making stories for other people, it's very interesting. But this is definitely out of my comfort zone, but I think it's going to be okay. So I'm excited about it.
That's sometimes the best stuff, though, when you push yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Which I think is what horror does for all of us. Because
Yes.
if we're going to tell a horror story, we're going to push ourselves outside of our comfort zones, I think.
You're right. I almost threw up twice writing one of my short stories for my collection, because I don't write stuff like that. And it was grossing me out. And I was like, I got to get through this scene. I got to, like, it's too important. And it's like one of my favorite things that I've ever like written. You're right. Yeah. It's incredible.
I'm really grateful to May for the Book of Queer Saints and having that come out, because it was really hard for a while to write queer characters who were villains and center stories on them. And I felt guilty about it a lot of times. I'm like, I shouldn't be doing that. I should be doing, but for me, I rationalize it also. I'm like, well, every character in your story is queer, so there has to be a villain. So,
That's a good point.
So everyone can't be a good person in yours. Otherwise, it's a very strange horror story.
Yeah.
So you can't do that. Because I'm so conscious of all the because queer characters, as you know, were coded to be villains for decades and decades.
Yes.
And
Yes.
So it's hard to get away from that guilt, but be realizing that it's okay to have queer characters who are villains and embracing that.
Yeah.
Embracing that which was influential in horror, because we all love the villains. That's why that's half the time why you watch the movies. Frankly, you don't really watch Friday the 13th for any of the main characters. I mean, maybe some people do. I shouldn't say that, but you watch Friday the 13th for Freddy.
You're looking for that.
I'm not Freddy, Nightmare on Elm Street is what I mean, but
you're looking for the bad. Like that's the. Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I mean, when people talk about the Conjuring movies, the last, not the first one, but they always talk about Valak. And they talk about the second one, and then they go into the Nun series. It's like they love Valak. People eat that up.
Movies make so much money.
They do, and I don't
quite
really
understand
like them,
but they make so much money.
Yeah, and it's what they're PG-13.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, that's honestly. That's probably really smart, because I think given the characters and the baddies in those, I think it needed to be a PG-13, because it's going to bring in, it's like the perfect setup for the slightly younger audience,
Same with Annabelle too. I mean,
Annabelle's the same way. Dolls. Yeah.
Dolls are creepy and fun.
Yeah.
But I'll always take Chucky over Annabelle. But I mean, Megan was a great film that brought tons of audiences into it.
Good. Yeah.
And it was PG-13, so
yeah. I know PG-13 gets such a bad rap, but there's so much good PG-13. The Insidious franchise is PG-13, and I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I love that franchise.
I think it's fun. I think it's a really fun franchise. I feel like every movie is very similar.
Oh yeah, no, they 100% are. That's true. They're pretty formula based. They're not.
Yeah,
It
feels very, very, very much like I'm watching the same movie every time, but I enjoy it, so I'm not going to complain. I enjoy that. So, and Patrick Wilson's always a fun actor to watch.
Yeah, I love him. He's great. Yeah, totally agree. Oh, cool.
But yeah, so that's my influential stuff.
Love it.
There's a lot of other movies I could have listed, but these are the ones that influenced me the most. I think that it's really fun to see. To sum up my list, it's really fun to see movies that play with genre and movies that and that's because that's what I like to do. And I like to be unexpected with things, or try to be unexpected with things.
Yeah.
I like to think the stories that I create are you don't necessarily see them coming. It might be to the point like M. Night Shyamalan where you're like, okay, I'm expecting something to happen. But I want to think that you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. So that's my goal is always to do that.
Yeah. No, it's a great list, and it was really great to finally get to talk to you face to face and chat about stuff.
That's the best part of this for sure. So
yeah,
because it's so much fun to talk to you, and
yeah.
I knew we would have a really great time talking about this stuff because we both really love these things. So
yes, and I feel like we feel similarly about a lot of stuff too, that it just makes it feel comfortable. It's not like I get really nervous. There's one other person just recently that we did a video with, but for the most part, when I'm going on camera for the first time with someone that I haven't been on cam, I'm a mess. Like I get sick to my stomach. I feel like my throat, like I get so nervous.
Totally.
Like
when I do my show, Psychic Power Hour, and I have somebody on who's coming on that I've never met before, I'm like,
I stress.
oh, this is so stressful. How are they going to be?
And it's stressful for so many reasons. It's stressful because you want it to go well. It's stressful because I think when you invite people you don't know into a queer space specifically, this is just my personal take on this as my experiences with it. It can be very nerve-wracking because I haven't had anybody come on that's been homophobic or anything to that extent, but I did have an influential horror a while ago. It is not, you cannot find this episode anymore. It doesn't exist. I had it up and then I changed my mind because I was like, nope, we got to stick with our feelings and our realities on this, and this needs to come down. But they were very racist. Like they went on this tangent about Candyman and being politically correct. And as soon as I said that, I just like my friend Mike was editing my videos at the time. This was back when I first started doing these, when I had like 5 subscribers. And the person, like Mike said, it was kind of funny because as soon as she said what she said, my whole demeanor shifted. And I just became this, just like, I'm going to jump through this screen. And so anyway, so it can be very scary to work with new people. But when I got, getting ready for this, I didn't feel that way. I was just like, oh, it's going to be, we're going to have a good time chatting, and it'll be like we've known each other forever.
Oh God, I feel the same. I felt the same when coming on, because sometimes when I've done a bunch this year trying to get ready with Brooklyn Butcher and A Taste of Youth and trying to get those stories out there. And sometimes you go on and you're just like, are we going to have any chemistry? Are we going to get along talking to each other? I'm just such a nervous wreck because I've never met this person, but I felt like it was going to be old hat with you already. So I was like,
same. Totally feel the same way. So. Good. Glad. All right, cool. Well, I think that is going to wrap up this episode of 5 Influential Horror. Once again, all of the links to find everything that Joshua is involved in will be in the description for this episode. So definitely recommend following and checking him out to see what he's up to, especially because there's so much coming out this year. So, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us on this episode of Influential Horror. We hope you have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.